You are sitting in your car after a long day. Or maybe you are lying in bed while the rest of the house is finally quiet. You are exhausted, but your mind will not shut off. You are thinking about your mother's health. You are worrying about your younger brother's latest mistake. You are wondering if you can afford to help your sister with that bill she mentioned. You are the firstborn. And even when nobody asks you to lead, you feel the weight of the entire family sitting squarely on your shoulders. You have spent your whole life being the one who has to be strong. You were the one who had to grow up first, the one who had to figure it out first, and the one who had to take the heat when things went wrong. Let me ask you something that you have probably never said out loud. Do you ever feel like you were born to be a shield for everyone else? Does it ever feel like there is an invisible line of defense in your family, and you are the only one standing on it? Most people would call this birth order or just family dynamics. They would say, you are just a responsible person. But I am here to tell you that what you are carrying is not just a personality trait. It is not just the result of being the first child in the house. It is a generational anointing. Maybe you have spent years feeling like you missed out on a real childhood because you were too busy helping raise everyone else. Maybe you have felt a deep, biting resentment because it seems like your siblings get a free pass while you are held to a standard of perfection. Maybe you are the only one in your bloodline who seems to care about breaking the cycles of addiction, poverty, or anger that have followed your family for 40 years. If you have ever felt like the odd one out because you refuse to settle for the mess your parents accepted, then this message is exactly for you. I want to offer you a new way to look at your life. You are not the unlucky child who had to work harder than everyone else. You are the pioneer. You are the spiritual scout, sent into the land first, to clear the path for those coming behind you. What the world calls a burden, God calls a selection. He did not give you that weight to crush you. He gave it to you because he knew you were the only one with the spiritual bone structure to carry it. This video is going to change how you see your birthright. We are going to look at the 7 signs that prove you aren't just the oldest. You are the anointed. The Bible tells us in the book of Exodus, chapter 13, verse 2, that every firstborn is to be set apart to the Lord. This was not a suggestion. It was a divine law. When God wanted to show his power and his ownership, he started with the firstborn. This means there is a mark on your life that has been there since the moment you were born. You didn't choose it, and you can't run from it. Think about Joseph. He was the firstborn of his mother, Rachel. He was the one who was given the coat of many colors. His older half-brothers hated him for it, but they didn't understand that his coat was a symbol of the responsibility he would one day carry for the entire nation. He had to go into the pit, the slave market, and the prison first. Why? Because the person with the generational anointing always has to face the fire first, so they can build a place of safety for the rest of the family later. If your life has felt like a series of fires, it is because you are building a city of refuge. Number 1, you were the experimental child who learned through fire. This experience was not a mistake of parenting, but God tempering your spirit for the weight you were born to carry. Let me say this straight, because it is something you have probably felt, but never dared to complain about. You were the one your parents practiced on. You were the one who dealt with the strictest rules, the highest expectations, and the most intense discipline. By the time your younger siblings came along, the edges had softened. The rules changed. You watched them get away with the very things that earned you a lecture or a punishment. You had to figure out how to navigate the world, how to handle school, and how to manage the family's emotions without a roadmap, because nobody had walked the path before you. You were the scout sent into the woods to find the trail. And you have the scars from the briars and the thorns to prove it. You remember the feeling of being the first to face every new stage of life. You were the first to deal with pressure, the first job, or the first heartbreak. And you often had to do it while your parents were still learning how to guide you. You did not have the luxury of watching an older brother or sister make mistakes so you could avoid them. You had to make the mistakes yourself. You had to fall down so the ones coming after you would know the holes. You spent your childhood being the reliable one because you realized early on that if you didn't keep things together, the whole structure might lean too far. Maybe that is you. You look at your younger siblings and you see a freedom they have. You see a lightheartedness in them that feels foreign to you. You feel like you were born with an old soul, carrying a seriousness. This mirrors the life of Moses. In the book of Exodus, chapter 2, verse 3, we see that his mother placed him in a basket in the Nile River because she could no longer hide him. He was the first child to face the threat of the Egyptian decree. He was the one who had to be the experiment of faith. He was sent into the water alone, while Miriam watched, while his older sister Miriam watched from a distance. Moses had to survive the palace of Pharaoh, learn the language of the enemy, and isolation, of being a Hebrew in an Egyptian world long before his siblings ever stepped into their roles. He was the firstborn of that generation's calling. He had to be tempered in the palace so he could later lead his brother Aaron and his sister Miriam through the wilderness. If you feel like you were the experiment, it is because God needed you to be the one with the thickest skin. He needed you to be the one who could handle the pressure of the palace and the heat of the desert, so that when your family needed a leader, you would already be unbreakable. Your childhood was not just a series of rules. It was a boot camp for a general. The world calls it being the guinea pig. God calls it being the pioneer. Number 1, you were the experimental child who learned through fire. This experience was not a mistake of parenting, but God tempering your spirit for the weight you were born to carry. Let me say this straight because it is something you have probably felt, but never dared to complain about. You were the one your parents practiced on. You were the one who dealt with the strictest rules, the highest expectations, and the most intense discipline. By the time your younger siblings came along, the edges had softened. The rules changed. You watched them get away with the very things that earned you a lecture or a punishment. You had to figure out how to navigate the world, how to handle school, and how to manage the family's emotions without a roadmap because nobody had walked the path before you. You were the scout sent into the woods to find the trail, and you have the scars from the briars and the thorns to prove it. You remember the feeling of being the first to face every new stage of life. You were the first to deal with the pressure of the first car, the first job, or the first heartbreak. And you often had to do it while your parents were still learning how to guide you. You did not have the luxury of watching an older brother or sister make mistakes so you could avoid them. You had to make the mistakes yourself. You had to fall down so the ones coming after you would know where the holes were. You spent your childhood being the reliable one because you realized early on that if you didn't keep things together, the whole structure might lean too far. Maybe that is you. You look at your younger siblings and you see a freedom they have that you never felt. You see a lightheartedness in them that feels foreign to you. You feel like you were born with an old soul, carrying a seriousness that doesn't match your age. This mirrors the life of Moses. In the book of Exodus, chapter 2, verse 3, we see that his mother placed him in a basket in the Nile River because she could no longer hide him. He was the first child of that household to face the direct threat of the Egyptian decree. He was the one who had to be the experiment of faith. He was sent into the water alone, while his older sister Miriam watched from a distance. Moses had to survive the palace of Pharaoh, learn the language of the enemy, and endure the isolation of being a Hebrew in an Egyptian world long before his siblings ever stepped into their roles. He was the firstborn of that generation's calling. He had to be tempered in the palace so he could later lead his brother Aaron and his sister Miriam through the wilderness. If you feel like you were the experiment, it is because God needed you to be the one with the thickest skin. He needed you to be the one who could handle the pressure of the palace and the heat of the desert, so that when your family needed a leader, you would already be unbreakable. Your childhood was not just a series of rules, it was a boot camp for a general. The world calls it being the guinea pig. God calls it being the pioneer. Number 2, you feel a heavy urgency to fix what you didn't break. This is the internal fire of a generational repairer. And it is a sign that God has trusted you with the spiritual restoration of your entire bloodline. Let's be honest about the weight. In the quiet moments when no one is looking, you are the one who stays up late worrying about a mortgage your parents cannot afford. You are the one who mediates the arguments between your siblings because you cannot stand the thought of the family falling apart. You see the patterns in your family, the debt, the secret addictions, the explosive tempers, and even though you did not start those fires, you feel like the only person standing there with a bucket of water. You spend your mental energy trying to bridge gaps created decades before. You walk into a room and immediately scan the emotional temperature, ready to adjust your own feelings just to keep everyone else from boiling over. Think about the last time a family crisis happened. You were probably the first person everyone called. They did not call to ask how you were doing. They called because they expected you to have the answer. You put your own life on hold to go fix a situation you didn't create. You might have felt a flash of anger, asking yourself why it is always your job to be the adult, even when the actual adults are in the room. You carry a sense of responsibility for people who are older than you, and you feel a crushing guilt if you cannot save them. You are not just being helpful. You are operating under a divine mandate to close the doors that were left open by previous generations. Sound familiar? You know this feeling of being a fixer who is constantly exhausted because you are carrying the luggage of people who refuse to pack their own bags. This is exactly what we see in the life of Nehemiah. He looks at the ruins of his ancestral home. In the book of Nehemiah, chapter 2, verse 17, Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace. Nehemiah did not burn those gates. He was not even alive when the walls were torn down. He was living a comfortable, high-ranking life in the palace of a foreign king. He could have ignored the news. He could have said, "That is my father's problem," or "That happened a long time ago." But because he carried a generational anointing, the brokenness of his family's heritage felt like a personal wound. He wept. He fasted. And then he risked his life to go back and fix what he did not break. If you find yourself constantly trying to rebuild the walls of your family, trying to establish financial stability where there was none, or trying to bring the presence of God into a home that has been spiritually dry for 40 years. You have the Nehemiah spirit. You were not born to just enjoy the fruit. You were born to heal the roots. People might call you controlling, but you can see the disgrace of the broken walls, and you refuse to let the next generation live in the rubble. God has given you the blueprints for a better future, and that is why you cannot rest while the walls are down. Builder. Number 3. Your isolation is actually a divine protection, and that distance was God's way of keeping your vision clear while He prepared you for the leadership you didn't ask for. Here is what nobody tells you about being the one God chose first. You will often feel like a foreigner in your own home. You find yourself sitting at family dinners, listening to the same old stories and the same old complaints. And you realize you have absolutely nothing to say. You check your phone, or you look at the clock, wondering how much longer. You have to stay before it is polite to leave. You have noticed that when you try to share a new idea or a goal you have reached, the room goes silent. Or worse, someone makes a joke to bring you back down to earth. You eventually stopped sharing your dreams because you got tired of seeing the blank stares. You have spent many nights wondering why your siblings seem to have a bond that you are not part of, and why it is so easy for them to just fit in, while you are always standing on the edge of the circle. Think about the last time you tried to set a boundary with your family. Maybe you said you couldn't lend money this time, or you said you wouldn't be coming over for the drama. The reaction was not understanding. It was a guilt trip. They told you that you have changed. They told you that you think you are better. You went home and cried because you don't feel better than anyone. You just feel different. You feel like you are speaking a language that no one else in your house understands. You have had to build a life for yourself outside of your family's expectations, and that has left you feeling like an island. You are the one who is always there for them, but you are also the one they understand the least. You know this feeling of being hidden even when you are standing right in front of them. This is exactly what happened to Esther. In the book of Esther, chapter 4, verse 14, her cousin Mordecai tells her that she was called for such a time as this. But before she reached that moment, she had to be isolated. She was taken away from her family and her people. She was placed in a palace where she had to hide her true identity. She was surrounded by people who did not share her faith. For a long time, she was alone in a crowd. She had to undergo months of preparation and purification in silence. If Esther had stayed in the comfort of her old neighborhood, she would have been just another girl in the crowd. She had to be separated so she could be positioned. God did the same thing to you. He allowed that feeling of isolation to grow because He didn't want the family spirit to infect your vision. If you felt too comfortable with the way your family lives, you would never have the drive to change the way your family lives. He kept you on the outside so you could see the patterns clearly. He protected you from the gossip and the small-mindedness by making you feel like you didn't belong. Esther's isolation was the thing. Your isolation is the very thing putting you in the presence of God. You are not being rejected by your family. You are being reserved by your Father. So the question is not why you feel so alone. The question is what God is protecting you from. Number 4, you carry the burden of the seer for your siblings. Your ability to see the storm before the first drop, of rain falls, is God's early warning system for your entire bloodline. Here is what nobody tells you about having a spiritual anointing in a family that is still spiritually asleep. You are the one who feels the weight of the secrets. You have spent your life with a gut feeling that you could never quite explain to anyone else. You can walk into your parents' house and feel the tension in the center of your chest before anyone even says hello. You look at your brother and you know he is lying about where he was last night. Not because you have proof, but because your spirit feels the friction of the deception. You look at your mother and you see the shadow of a deep sadness. She is trying to hide behind a busy kitchen and a forced smile. You are the one who wakes up at 3 in the morning with a sudden, heavy urge to pray for a sibling you haven't talked to. Your heart starts racing, and you feel a strange sense of urgency that makes you pace the floor. You might find out the next day that they were in a crisis or making a dangerous decision at that exact moment. You have tried to warn them in the past. You have said, "I don't think you should trust that new friend." But instead of listening, they call you judgmental, too sensitive, or dramatic. You have learned to keep your mouth shut because it hurts to be right and still be ignored. You carry the burden of seeing the cliff while everyone in the car is still laughing and driving at full speed. It is a lonely, heavy place to be, standing at the edge of the road, waving your arms, while your own people tell you that you are just imagining. Sound familiar? You know this feeling of being the only one with your eyes open in a house full of people. This is exactly what we see in the life of the prophet Samuel. In the book of 1 Samuel chapter 3, in verse 4, we see that the word of the Lord was rare in those days. The priest in charge, Eli, had grown old, and his spiritual vision had become dim. His own sons were living in open rebellion against God. Even while they worked in the temple, God did not speak to the experienced priest or the grown men. Instead, God bypassed the entire leadership and called out to the young boy, Samuel. In the middle of the night, Samuel had to hear the truth about judgment. Imagine the weight on that child. He had to see the truth about the family he lived with and carry the knowledge before he was even old enough to lead. Samuel was not looking for a reason to criticize. He was simply given eyes to see what others chose to ignore. He was the first of a new prophetic line. He was the one God used. If you are the firstborn with anointing, you are the Samuel of your house. God is giving you sight to stand in the gap. He shows you the addiction before it takes hold. He shows you the financial disaster before it ruins your parents. He has made you a spiritual watchman. You are not too sensitive. You are simply tuned into a frequency. Number 5. You are fighting battles your parents never had to face. This frontal assault is proof that you are the one chosen to end the war for your entire bloodline. You are dealing with a level of internal pressure that the generation before you simply ignored or suppressed. You might be the first person in your family to ever admit that you struggle with anxiety, or that you feel a deep, unexplainable heaviness in your soul. When you try to talk about it, they tell you that you are being soft, or that you just need to keep busy. You are trying to figure out how to break the cycle of toxic communication while your aunts and uncles just keep yelling and calling it passion. You are the one who is paying for the therapy, reading the books on trauma, and spending hours on your knees asking God to heal the parts of your heart that your family tree has been hiding for 50 years. You spend your weekends trying to recover from the emotional drain of the week, while it seems like everyone else in your family can just keep going without a second thought. You are fighting for your mental clarity, your emotional health, and your spiritual peace. You are the one who has to explain to your siblings why you are setting boundaries, and you have to endure the cold silence or the passive-aggressive comments that follow. You are doing the heavy lifting of self-reflection, while everyone else is busy pointing fingers and blaming the past. You are facing spiritual warfare that feels 10 times more intense than anything your father ever mentioned. And it makes you feel like you are doing something wrong. But the truth is, the enemy isn't attacking you because you are weak. The enemy is attacking you because you are the first one who actually stood up to fight. Maybe that is you. You feel exhausted because you are fighting a war on two fronts: the world outside and the dysfunction inside, your own home. This is exactly what we see in the life of David. In the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 17, verse 34. David stands before the king and explains that he has been keeping his father's sheep. He tells the king that when a lion or bear came to steal a lamb, he didn't run away. He went after it. He struck it. He killed it. Now, catch the detail. David was the only one in his family who had those scars. His older brothers were soldiers in the National Army, but they were paralyzed with fear on the sidelines. His father, Jesse, was back at the farm, safe from the giants. David had to face the level of combat that the rest of his family had surrendered to. He was the one who had to step into the valley of Elah to face Goliath, a giant that had terrified the experienced men of his family for 40 days. David didn't have his father's armor, and he didn't have his brother's approval. He had to fight a new kind of enemy, using only the strength God had given him. In the secret places, if you are facing Goliaths of depression, addiction, or secret family sins that have kept your elders in hiding, you are not being punished. You are being positioned. David didn't just win a fight. He changed the atmosphere of the entire nation. You are not just surviving a struggle. You are breaking a stronghold. Number 6. The peace of the home depends on your presence. This invisible authority is the sign that God has positioned you as the spiritual anchor for everyone around you. Let me say this straight. It is exhausting to be the one who is never allowed to have a bad day. It is a heavy, silent burden to realize that the emotional climate of your entire family shifts based on how you are doing. You have noticed this pattern for years. When you are absent from the family dinner, the conversation turns into a battlefield within 20 minutes. When you stop answering the group chat for a few days, old grudges start to resurface among your siblings. But the moment you walk through the door, a strange thing happens. You don't have to give a lecture or take sides in the latest argument. You simply bring your presence into the room, and the shouting stops. You have the ability to sit in the middle of a storm and keep your head clear. And because you are calm, everyone else begins to settle down. You are the one people look to when they are panicking, searching your face to see if they should be worried too. You know, this feeling of being the unofficial emotional thermostat for people twice your age. You walk into the house, and you can feel the tension in the air before anyone even says hello. You immediately start doing the emotional work. You crack a joke. You start cleaning the kitchen to lower the stress level. Or you listen to your mother complain just so she doesn't take it out on your father. You are the glue that holds pieces together. You feel like if you ever truly let go, the entire family structure would collapse into the dirt. Maybe that is you. You feel like you can't ever truly relax because you are too busy maintaining the peace. This mirrors the life of the patriarch Noah. In the book of Genesis, chapter 6, verse 8, Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Now, think about the atmosphere of the world Noah lived in. It was a world filled with violence, corruption, and chaos. Noah was the first of his generation to hear a different sound, the sound of God's voice. He was the one who had to build a structure of safety, the ark, when there wasn't a cloud in the sky. But the most important part of the story isn't the wood. It is the fact that Noah's walk with God became salvation. His family were saved from the flood, not because they had built the ark, but because they were connected to him. They were saved because they were connected to the one who had anointing. Noah carried the peace of God into a chaotic world. He was the anchor that kept them from being swept away by judgment. If you feel the stability of your family depends on you, you are experiencing the Noah anointing. You are the one walking with God in a way that creates a boat for your family. Number 7. You are the one who will receive the double portion of the breakthrough. This is not just a nice thought or a way to make you feel better. It is the legal requirement of the firstborn in the economy of God. Let me tell you something that most people overlook when they talk about the burden of the oldest child. You have spent your entire life being the one who gives. You gave your time to help your parents when they were overwhelmed. You gave your money to help your brother when he couldn't keep a job. You gave your emotional stability to keep the house from falling apart when the adults were acting like children. You have watched others take shortcuts while you took the long road of integrity. You have seen people get the blessing without the bruising. And there were times when you felt like you were nothing more than the unpaid labor for everyone else's harvest. You have sat in your car or in the back of a church and asked God why you are the one who has to work twice as hard to get half as far. You have watched your siblings receive grace for mistakes that you were never allowed to make. You have been the one holding the ladder for 20 years, while everyone else climbed up to see the view. You have felt like the sacrificial lamb of the family tree, the one whose dreams had to be put on a shelf so that everyone else could pursue theirs. But I am here to tell you that the seasons of silent labor are coming to an end. The years you spent clearing the land for people who didn't even thank you are being calculated by a God who never forgets a debt. Does that sound familiar? You know the feeling of being the worker who never gets the trophy? The one who is always expected to be fine so that everyone else can be needy. In the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 21, verse 17, the Bible is very clear about the rights of the firstborn. It says that the father must acknowledge the firstborn and give him a double portion of all he has. This was the law. It didn't matter if the father felt like it or not. The firstborn was entitled because they were the beginning of his strength. This same principle applies to your spiritual life, because you carried the beginning of the strength for your family, because you faced the hardest battles and did the most work. God is legally bound by his own word to give you a double portion of the peace, the joy, and the prosperity that your family has been missing for generations. Think about the life of Elisha. In the book of 2 Kings, chapter 2, verse 9, we see a powerful exchange between a mentor and a student. Elijah is about to be taken up to heaven, and he asks Elisha what he can do for him. Elisha does not ask for a safe life or an easy path. He says, "Please let a double portion of your lay spirit be upon me." Now, remember, Elisha was not just a spectator. He was a man who had spent his life working hard in the fields. When Elijah first found him, he was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen. He knew what it meant to do the heavy lifting. He served Elijah faithfully for years. He took care of the small things so Elijah could do the big things. And because he stayed when it was difficult, and because he served when he could have been leading his own life, he received twice the power. He performed twice as many miracles as the man who came before him. You are the Elisha of your bloodline. You have been plowing the family field for a long time. You have been serving everyone else's vision while yours was hidden in the dirt. But because you have been faithful to the yoke, God is about to hand you the mantle. You are moving into a season where the breakthrough will not be a trickle. It will be a flood. You will see more progress in the next 2 years than your family saw in the last 50. You are about to receive the double portion of the joy that your mother never found, and the double portion of the security that your father never built. So the question is not how much longer you have to wait for your turn. The question is whether you are ready to receive the harvest of everything you planted in the seasons when no one was watching. You have spent your whole life thinking you were just the one who had to grow up too fast. You thought you were the one who got the short end of the stick because you were born first. You thought the pressure and the expectations were just a result of your parents' mistakes or your family's dysfunction. But I am here to tell you that you weren't abandoned to the responsibility. You were trusted with the destiny. You were not a victim of your birth order. You were the designated driver for a family that did not know where it was going. You were not chosen to be the strong one by accident. You were chosen to be the pioneer, because God knew you were the only one who wouldn't quit when the path got steep. To the firstborn daughter who has been a second mother, God sees you. To the firstborn son who took the job he didn't want, God sees you. You have carried the heavy bags for so long that your shoulders have forgotten how to relax. You have kept the family secrets, managed tempers, and paid the price for a peace you didn't even get to enjoy. You have been the shield that took the blows, so the ones behind you never would. You have spent your life being the person everyone else could lean on. And you have wondered more than once who was going to let you lean on them. The conviction and the weight you feel right now are not signs that you are failing. They are signs that you are the generational anchor. You were never meant to be defined by how much you could do for everyone else. You were meant to be refined by the very fire you survived first. You are the cycle breaker. You are the wall builder. You are the pioneer that God used to clear the ground for a new future. The world calls you the responsible one, but God calls you the anointed one. The weight you carry is not a burden, it is a selection. You were chosen first because you were the only one God could trust to carry the light into a dark house. Your labor has been recorded. Your tears have been counted. And your double portion is already on the way.